Herkese merhaba. Hepinizi bir kez daha görmek çok güzel. And I'm sure that was completely understandable, but I always have to try. I think you're used to me now. I'm sure many people today will talk about how hard the past 18 months have been, and they have been. But there's something that they've lifted up that is important we recognize and reflect on, which I call the story of separation. So separation between humans and nature, which has allowed us to plunder nature's gifts and resources for our own benefit as a species. And separation between humans and humans, which sets nation against nation, religion against religion, people against people in politics, in gender, in culture, in race, and in place. But for one moment in the face of the global pandemic, we were able to stop. And in our confinement, we missed the chance to connect with the nature we've taken for granted, and we missed each other. And we found new tolerance and respect and love for one another. And many of us found our connection to our places, our local places, that again, we've taken for granted, or in our quest for globalization, felt lacked the attraction of bigger places. A shock like the COVID pandemic is always an opportunity to reflect on who it is that we are and what we're doing, and perhaps the biggest question of human existence, why are we here? And I've been thinking about that a lot. What is ours to do as a species when we've wreaked so much havoc on the natural world, and it's coming back to bite us pretty hard? And I'm happy to share at the end of that period of reflection, I concluded that there is a really deep and important reason we're here, that we humans have a really important role to play, and that we've just forgotten what it is in our quest for growth and globalization. And that role is as evolutionary and systemic catalysts for the future of life on Earth. So what does that mean, and how do we embrace that role and build the capability to fill such a role? I have some themes to share with you and some questions to pose so you can go away and think about those things. So I'm going to share my slides with you, and I'm hoping that you can see them if I enter full screen. Okay, so this is how life works. Life creates the conditions conducive to more life. It grows continually in complexity over time at all scales. Over the lifetime of this planet Earth, it was once a barren rock until about 3.8 billion years ago, when life first appeared in simple cell microbes that left carbon signals in the rocks to let us know that they were there. What does that mean for us? It took another couple of billion years until something more dramatic happened again. As microbes began living inside other microbes. Mitochondria, the organelles that process food into energy, evolved from these mutually beneficial relationships. And for the first time, DNA became packaged in nuclei. Cells began to group and live together, clustering in specialized cooperating shells. Cells eventually became the first animals, which DNA evidence suggests evolved around 800 million years ago. Sponges, in fact, were the earliest animals, and thanks to their hard skeletons, they became the first builders on Earth, for those of you that are in constructing coral reefs. And throughout all the eras of life on Earth, from the Ediacaran through to the Holocene, this is what life has done. Life's pattern is constant development of complexity. And if we look at life in a single scale of life, a small cell comes together in the process of fertilization for most animals. During gestation, those cells multiply again and again until the life form reaches the level of complexity where its current form no longer serves it, breaks out of the L, and it is then cared for in the next stage of complexity by its parents, who care for it, giving it food and shelter. And at some point, it reaches a new level of complexity and it flies the nest. This pattern can be seen across all life forms throughout all life on Earth. So what does that mean for us? That means that we should always be thinking about what our role is as sustainability leaders and organizations in the next evolution of our development as brands that serve life on Earth and doesn't deplete it. So who has done that? Over many decades, I've worked with Patagonia in different phases of its evolution. When I first met the brand, I was in my teens. It was a brand for cool dude skiers and I wanted to be one, so I bought a snap tee. When I started work with them, they were just discovering that those snap tees were made using toxic products like formaldehyde to fix the color, and it was making their employees in shops sick. That evolution of Patagonia was one of the first companies to radically go through its supply chain, which eventually developed into the Footprint Chronicles that were launched at the turn of this century, documenting the impact of every single component part, something that many companies haven't done yet. And in the late 90s, it evolved yet again to work with its unique culture to become an essence, to become an activist brand, working to protect nature. Today, it's looking again at what its role should be on a planet under threat of climate change and the sixth mass extinction. What life does is it evolves to the context around it. Darwin was definitely misinterpreted. He didn't say survival of the fittest and mean beat the hell out of each other in competition. He said the most adaptable species are the ones that survive. So we need to learn to design for constant change. So I have a question for you. What would be your approach to evolution? What could your organization become a catalyst? How could it become a catalyst for the evolution of life on Earth? I think we have to recognize the way in which we're going about change has not necessarily been working. Creating change that is meaningful and regenerative means finding ways to be in relationship with all life systems. One of life's key principles is being relational and interconnected. So we need to assign a new role to ourselves where we are engaging as co-evolutionary participants with life all around us. And that means mapping and understanding the interconnecting system of wholes that our projects and our organizations have the power to influence. Life works with wholes and the interconnecting relationships between them. So how should we think about that? A forest is a whole. It has parts, it has trees, but the whole comes together to create an interconnected, independent aliveness. A city is a whole, a school is a whole, a village is a whole, a corporation is a whole, and some brands within a corporation are wholes. Wholes contain organs, which are the basis of working systems, ordering and organizing the activities inside the whole. And in the human, here's me before my hair was gray, it's elimination, respiration, circulation. In a city, a sewage system, a water system. In a school, teachers and headmasters. So what's the difference between a degenerative whole and a regenerative whole? Well, a regenerative whole engages in processes that use what we call self-managing open exchanges. What does that mean? So let's take an industry we know. Fossil fuels as a system of energy. We take it from the earth, we process it, we send it into cities and buildings and houses to heat them, and the end result is warmth, but also CO2. A regenerative heating system would be where there is more of something in the process rather than less. So a system that allows the original source to evolve in the way life designed it to. So, for example, in the case of a forest, that would be working with the wood with fallen trees rather than creating monoculture forests to make furniture. Or it would use a self-renewing source like wind. So I have another question for you. How does your organization extract something from other living wholes to the detriment of that whole? And what processes could you change to ensure you allow the original living sources of your products to continue to evolve in the way in which they were designed to do? We really need to adopt an ecosystem approach that reflects the way living systems work and begin to work with complex ecosystems in a way that is based on understanding how they work. And living systems thrive at a local scale linking level, not at all at a global level. One of the things that globalization does is that it treats people, places, and ecosystems and landscapes as if they were all the same. Standardization and homogenization are the holy grails of global business systems because that's where most profit is made. So in the food system, sometimes in the winter, we experience the taste of a tomato as being a bit like cardboard, or at least we do here. In Turkey, you probably have better tomatoes than we do. But it tastes like cardboard compared to the ones in the garden because it's been bred to grow faster, to be resistant to disease, and to have thicker skin so that it lasts longer on the shelf. And the end result is a tomato with no taste and no nutrients. On the high street, when you walk along the luxury end of town, you could be in Shanghai, London, New York, or indeed the Zulu Center in Istanbul. Life doesn't work like this. It works with nested systems of biocultural uniqueness, interconnected, interdependent systems. The Sea of Marmara is not the Mediterranean. Siberian forests are not British Columbia. New York is not Istanbul. This wolf is nested in a territory that is part of the ecosystem of Yosemite National Park in the USA. What happens when you take away a keystone node like the wolf from the system, as the Americans did in the late 1920s when they hunted it to extinction? Suddenly, the elks and the bison there grew in numbers because they were no longer hunted, and they began to eat all of the grasslands, and the ecosystem started to collapse. With the reintroduction of the wolf in the late 20th century, within 20 years, the ecosystem had stabilized. What happens when you take away a life flow like water from a system, for example, in central Anatolia, where flamingos flourish, as happened last year and this year, is the flamingos' babies begin to die. Let's think about it in relation to wholes. A city is a whole, but nested within it are districts and communities. The city itself is nested in a water system. So Fatih in Istanbul is nested within the Bosphorus watershed. A school is nested in a district, but also in regional education systems, or a specific system of education like the Green School here in Bali. An island resort is nested in an archipelago, but also in an ocean or in a specific system such as tourism. And there are relationships between these which allow life to thrive. So there's some more questions for you. What systems is your business nested in? And how do you interact with those living systems to cause them to thrive or fail? So place, whether we call it a bioregion or an ecosystem, is the scale at which nature works. The planet's a series of interconnected, adjacent bioregions with specific patterns, flows, cultures, and economies. There's some property of life that exists in these places that determines the kind of people that gravitate there and the kinds of economies that they can create. One of the best ways that we can work on the interface between human systems and nature is in place. Now, one of the wonderful things about humans is that we are built to think and understand the world in stories. We make connections when we see a story, what happens between the interconnecting parts. We can use a story of place to see how life works over thousands of years, how the land has formed and how it shaped the people in the place and what makes it unique and what is unique about the economy. If we take, for example, a UK brand called Sea Salt, which is based in Cornwall, which if you've ever watched on TV a series called Poldark, you may be familiar with, but you may never have seen that. It's nested in an ecosystem that has always nurtured hardy, resilient community. It has known piracy in past times. It's always been a source of creativity and art. It's beloved by tourists. The patterns and flows of this place are static and ever-changing. Those who stay and those who come and go. It has a poor economy with a low per capita income. It's seasonally dependent on tourism. There's incoming wealth that's buying up property and land that locals can't afford. So what could this company, this brand, Sea Salt's regenerative role in the future of Cornwall be? Currently, it merely celebrates the art and culture of the place by partnering with local artists in the creation of fabrics. But what if the way in which it could be true to the living systems patterns around it would be to support creating a seasonal ecosystem of entrepreneurs, not pirates, that would be focused on creating regenerative startups that would move away again once they were established. They launched them and fledged them, true to the ecological patterns of place. So my final questions for you. What could a better understanding of the story of place in which your business is based or birthed add to your vitality and resilience in the future? What is it that the living system to which you are connected wants to be more of? In each place in which we live, in each place on the planet where healthy communities have a good relationship with their natural systems, where there is health in place, if each place on the planet were healthy, then the sum total of that is greater than the parts, and we have a healthy world that thrives, and one in which there is successful ongoing differentiation and diversity of culture that's celebrated. That's how nature does it. That is how life works. If we make a contribution to the health and vitality of the systems we're part of, that's what gives us vitality, offering something essential to that larger ecosystem that makes us entirely viable as places, businesses, and brands. Regenerative work is really important on the planet. When we work as part of living systems that are a part of a living world, using our essential gifts, we'll embrace the roles that the world is literally dying for us to play as a species. We have great potential for destruction and great potential for the next leap in evolution. So I invite you all as global brands to embrace and enable your contribution to enable the conditions conducive to life, to using our enormous capacity for creativity to live and design in partnership with nature and life. If we save the places of the world, we save our planet. Teşekkürler, tekrar görüşene kadar.